welcome to another lean, mean, trim, and grim episode of Midlife Krisis. Now, grim is only because heavy metal is the final answer. But so we're going to be talking about some of the stuff that we are currently playing.
You have props.
I have, when I talk about the games, or when I have the time to talk about these games, I like to show the games that I'm playing because look at me. I am nothing else if not a shelf queen, which is such an important facet of this wonderful hobby of ours. So let's see here. I've got a couple games that I want to talk about, and then I've got a thing that I want to talk about that I've been playing a lot of. And that thing might dovetail into a Let's Play. So we'll see where this goes. But I will selfishly start this train rolling here. I have here two sort of old Xbox games right here. This is the Metal Gear Solid Volume 1 Master Collection. And then this is Sonic Origins Plus. So both of these are compilations of, you guessed it, Uncle Bob, old games. Because I just kind of like them more than new games. And I'm not alone in this endeavor, turns out. Anyway, I will start with Metal Gear first, just because I fucking love Metal Gear games. And I did, let me ask you, or have you asked me rather, did I need to buy this? Go ahead and ask me that question.
Sure. Well, it's rhetorical, Brian. Did you need to buy this?
I did not need to buy this.
Right. The better question is, how many other versions of those games do you actually own?
That's let's do that right now. Okay, so I have a Metal Gear 1 on the original PlayStation. I have Metal Gear Twin Snakes on the GameCube, made by Silicon Knights, which is a fun thing. I have Metal Gear Solid 1 on the PS3 Metal Gear Solid Collection. And that, I believe, ends Metal Gear Solid 1. Moving on to Metal Gear Solid 2, which is the reason why I bought this, and the main thing I'm going to be talking about after this fun exercise concludes. But I've got Metal Gear Solid 2, the original Sons of Liberty release on the PS2. Then I have, I believe it was called Substance on the original Xbox, where they added some new features and stuff. And then also on the PS3 collection that came out. And then Metal Gear Solid 3, you guessed it, the original PS2 version. I have, and of course, on all these games, also this most recent release that Konami did. This is only, I think, I want to say maybe like 5-6 months old, something like that. Metal Gear Solid 3 is getting a remake, Metal Gear Solid Delta, which I will be buying, duh. And then that's also on the other collection. They say this is Volume 1, right? It's right there on the title. It says Volume 1. So Volume 2, if they make it, I'm assuming is going to be all the portable stuff, the PSP games. And Peace Walker, by the way, go ahead. Metal Gear Peace Walker is such it's not an underrated game because people that know about it love it and like consider it like in the tippy top of Metal Gear games. But it is, dear friend, a Metal Gear Solid game mixed with Monster Hunter. That's exactly what that game is. With Pokemon elements. With fucking Pokemon elements. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's like the 3 best things ever in video games in one product.
I'm looking at the back of this, and it says Godzilla copyright 1954.
Yeah.
Is he involved in
the theme? Godzilla's theme song is in one of these games.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
The very famous Toho.
Yeah, that's less cool than what I was.
No, it's still really fucking cool. It's a really awesome song. But I see what you're saying. It would be neat if Godzilla came out and Snake got to ride him, and maybe he called him Meryl and said, "Damn." Whatever.
I mean, if you want me to try these games, Brian, that would be a pretty good way to sell it.
Okay, so real quick, I'll talk about the collection itself. The collection's kind of a little bit of a well, I should say when it first came out, it was a bit of a whiff. I didn't buy it when it first came out because it was such a hard whiff. There's all kinds of graphical issues. It literally didn't look as good as the last gen's remasters.
Right, I heard that.
A bunch of issues with textures. Now, I bought this game recently at Best Buy online for I think it was like $19.99. And so at that price, I'd be a fool not to add to my stack of Metal Gear games.
You can't afford not to buy this game.
I can't leave that on the fucking table.
You have 3 other copies of.
Yeah. Well, what if my PS2 dies? God forbid.
Yeah. And your PS1.
I will buy more of those. You're right. That's how you solve that. I will just buy another PS2. So anyway, I bought it because I could, and it was only $20. But really, lately, I've been thinking a lot about Metal Gear Solid 2. And Metal Gear Solid 2, of all the Metal Gear games, I've played all the Metal Gear games multiple times, especially 1 and 3. 3, most people are going to tell you, like it's like not only the best Metal Gear game, but pound for pound, probably Kojima's finest work. It's an incredible
Metal Gear Solid 3.
Metal Gear Solid 3.
What year did that come out?
2004, I believe, for PS2. And then again, we mentioned it, but Delta is coming out, I want to say, this year, end of like holiday area. I don't know. Probably delayed. It's a new game, so it's going to be delayed.
Well, see, I'm thinking next year.
Yeah. And also, I don't know about that game. So I saw a trailer. I heard Dave Hayter's voice, and I was like, "Fucking finally, he's back." That's the voice of Snake for you, not you, because I know you know. I know you know who Dave Hayter is. But that's a big thing that Kojima did that I think upset a lot of fans. Is he spent millions of dollars to be that starfucker that he is, to get Kiefer Sutherland to do the voice of Snake in Metal Gear Solid 5, and he spoke maybe 15 seconds of dialogue in the totality of that game. It was stupid.
How's the? So you're playing it. Mm-hmm. You are not a starfucker.
Yes.
But you're.
I'm a Dave Hayter fucker for the record.
So when you hear Kiefer Sutherland's voice, are you immediately like offended because it's not Dave Hayter? Did you?
I was offended when it was publicized that they were doing this, because that's what they did. They were like, and by the way, we got a real celebrity to be the voice of Snake.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know that like we're Metal Gear Solid nerds, right? And we're all like now at this point married to Dave Hayter's voice. Like that's, I close my eyes and think of Solid Snake and I hear that guy's voice. And now you're gonna change that for literally no other reason other than like you want to be a Hollywood director, Mr. Kojima.
Yeah. Was it panned by most gamers? That decision?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and because it's twofold. Like the performance is, he probably did it in a day. Not even kidding. And like it's very phoned in.
Okay.
Dave Hayter, say what you will about, and maybe this is an area where you and I are gonna see things differently here. Dave Hayter's performance is very melodramatic. It's very like to me, it's fucking essential. Like I need Snake to sound like this, like very like kind of over the top, but still subdued. And he, as a voice actor, by the time you play Metal Gear Solid 4, like he's just a good voice actor. Like he's just up there with, in my opinion, he's up there with like the Troy Bakers of the world. Like he just is a good voice actor. But when he first started in this new world of voice acting in video games that isn't, like the working design staff doing Lunar reads for Sega CD, like he was melodramatic and campy and all that other stuff. But like it's one of those things that it works. Like it's just perfect and it's synonymous with the character and it's a part of the experience. So this was a Kojima thing. And in fact, I think Dave Hayter has done interviews where I think people from Konami were like pushing back against it because Konami was fucking, and this is wild, Konami was smarter than Kojima about this when they were like, hey, like we like ruined our reputation as like being a video game publisher, but like you should probably keep Dave Hayter in this game because like the fans love him.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I'm gonna make movies, me. Anyway, it was a mistake. And so that's the Kiefer Sutherland story when it comes to Metal Gear Solid. But anywho, I saw the trailer for Delta, heard Dave Hayter's voice, and was like, oh, fuck yeah, they're righting the wrongs. And then I found out that like, no, they're just reusing the original voice track from the PS2 game. Which is like, on the one hand, cool. Like, great. There's nothing wrong with it. Like, it's kind of
that's what you fell in love with, right?
And it's kind of perfect in every single way, shape, and form. However, like I wonder what Mr. Hayter himself feels about that. And I double wonder if he's getting any sort of royalty from that. Don't know that he is. I haven't seen any chatter from him. Dave Hayter, for what this is worth, is like a pretty successful screenwriter and always has been. Like the voice acting thing was something that he kind of did on the side. And he was a live action actor in the 90s. He did the live action version of the Guyver. I believe part 2. Mark Hamill played Guyver in 1. and Dave Hayter's Part 2. That's a deep cut for my friends out there.
They're very deep cuts. Oh my god.
Anyway, but he really, like, he's made his money being a screenwriter, and he's a pretty successful and long tenured one at that. So like him doing Solid Snake is almost like he does it because he loves the fans of the series and he loves the series. So when he got removed from it, he like took it personally and was like, well, fuck you guys and fuck you, Kojima. So anyway, that's that. But anywho, bringing it back to Metal Gear Solid 2. It's the only Metal Gear Solid game that I only played through one time. And it's one of those ones where my experience of it on that initial playthrough 23 years ago now, which is fucking wild, I was kind of disappointed in it. And there was a lot of fans that were kind of disappointed in it because, spoilers, by the way, this is, a 23-year-old thing, but spoilers nonetheless. You don't really play as Solid Snake in that game. You play as Snake in the first part of the game, which lasts, it's called the Tanker, and it lasts like maybe 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours if you're stretching things. And then Tanker blows up, you see that there's a new Metal Gear, and then you start the rest of the game, which is, I think they call it Plant, but it's the big shell, which I'll get into in a second. But the rest of the game, you're playing as this character named Raiden, who's like a young, like rookie dude, kind of annoying. He has a girlfriend that talks to you nonstop, and she's also annoying. And Snake is in the game, but like he's an NPC that like gives you advice throughout the mission and all this other stuff. And like, truth be told, when I went through all this stuff, the word I would use is overall disappointing. There's some things I liked at the time, and then there's some things that I didn't like so much. But that's the reason why I never went back and played it. But I've been thinking about it a lot in the last few years. Reason being is like the main plot point of the game, and you do have to get it through the game quite a bit for this to be unraveled fully. But and it's fucking gnarly. Like Kojima kind of has a history of doing this. But it's really, really, really prophetic. The whole point of this game is that information can be controlled, and he who controls the information the best has like very consequential power. And so we look at like the current world landscape, things like AI, going back to COVID and thinking about how fucking gnarly shit got with information when it comes to COVID, how other foreign governments, Russia, China, have influenced our own social media against us to be, and quite successfully, keep us divided. And then you have politicians that earn money. Well, not just politicians, but politicians, podcasters, all these other people that earn significant amounts of money on this fucking crooked information that is manipulated out of the hatch. And Kojima kind of predicted all of that stuff in 2000. And so that if I was going to play any one of these games again, Metal Gear Solid 1 is one of my favorite games of all time. Don't really need to play it again. It's been dozens of times. 3, I kind of intentionally don't want to play it again because I will, like a total sucker, get that remake, and hopefully it's like a C+. But like I'm gonna play through that game again. It'll be that new version with like newfangled graphics and whatever other improvements they come up with. But Metal Gear Solid 2, which I don't think is ever gonna get a remake because it is this divisive game, like I just wanted to experience it again. So I've been playing it. I just right before you came over, I finished the Harrier fight, which is more than halfway through the big bulk of the game, and so now some of the plot points about who's screwing who with what information, like that's now starting to rear its head, and it's reminding me of some of the other plot points in the game that are further down the line to experience. But it is so Raiden is still annoying. He's still kind of wimpy.
Okay. And
what's funny, so his character, you spend all this time in Metal Gear Solid 2 playing as him and like just wishing that you were playing as Snake. And fast forward to Metal Gear Solid 4, and when Raiden comes back, he's very different looking. He's like fucking awesomely powerful. And the whole time that he's a part of that game, you're just like, well, fuck, I really wish I was playing as Raiden right now. And then they made a whole separate game that Platinum did. Platinum, who makes Bayonetta.
Platinum?
Oh, yeah. The Platinum. They made a game called Metal Gear Rising, where all you do is play as this fucking beefed up cybernetic kill machine ninja version of Raiden, and it fucking rules. Like it's a platinum game, and it's wonderful. And you're just slicing and dicing robots in half, and it's wonderful. But I always thought that was kind of neat that like Kojima took the criticism of the character Raiden, and he's like, "Oh, you don't like this character, huh? I'll show you. I'll make him cool, and you'll want to play as him." But yeah, there's so much about what happens in the plot of this game, and so this is super important too. Like, and I'm assuming very safely that you don't remember, other than I'm sure you knew this was a thing. You don't remember anything about how the game is marketed or any of that stuff, right?
No, definitely no.
So this is something that could have only have happened at that time when the internet was a thing, but not the thing that it is now. But this game was entirely marketed as this is the sequel to Metal Gear Solid. We're only showing you Solid Snake, like from that tanker segment. Look how great these graphics were, and at the time they were fucking mind blowing. The whole PS2 Emotion Engine thing was like that's what this game was all about, and it was just like fuck yeah, like Metal Gear Solid, one of the best PlayStation games. Here's the sequel. This is incredible. And then it came out, and the whole thing about Raiden that I just told you about, nobody knew about it. And it was such a well-guarded and protected secret. No games magazines knew about it ahead of time. They were told, like, once they got the review copies, like, you cannot talk about this thing that happens 2 hours into the game. You can talk about the game and how it's played and all this other stuff, but you can't talk about this. And it's just like, well, how do we do that? How is that even a possibility? And so what they did, the game pros of the world at the time said, well, we're not going to fucking review the game then. Like it'll come out, people will find out about this crazy secret, and then we'll review the game. And that's kind of what they had to do. But again, like the fact that it was such a well protected secret, like that'll never happen ever again. Like even the best in the business at keeping secrets, Nintendo gets leaked from time to time again. Like that happens.
The most famous recent example I can think of, a game you haven't played yet, so I won't talk about it too much. The Last of Us 2 had major plot points spoiled, I think, a month before the game came out that sort of tainted the reception of the game at launch. And there were some major reveals that came out that they were trying to do a similar thing to what you're describing with Metal Gear Solid 2 to really kind of protect the integrity of the vision of the single player experience. And then it leaked and then it got tainted. So anyway, you're probably right. And then just the way the games are marketed and so many different people get access to the thing before it comes out, it's impossible for somebody to not.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like, and again, we're talking about Metal Gear Solid 2. Like, there wasn't even a Friendster on the internet. Like social media wasn't even like not even a whiff of it.
Twitter was not even a glint in anybody's eye.
So you don't have these platforms that ruin our society and take away joy from so many things. But that's like, so if the core like meaning of this game is to talk about like the control of information, all that stuff, and Kojima himself is controlling the information about the release of the game. Like it feeds into itself, and it's just this really cool, interesting thing, and very, very Kojima-y. So. Go ahead.
Is this one okay? Man, I hope I get this question right, and then also that you know the reference. But I think I'd seen something that was like there was a Guinness World Record for the longest video game cutscene ever, and it was from a Kojima game, and specifically a Metal Gear game. And I thought that the number was like 50 minutes, where you're just watching like 50 straight minutes of various cutscenes going from one thing to another.
In Metal Gear Solid 4.
Oh, that's 4. Okay.
And it's I think it's like 46 minutes long.
Okay.
And I loved every second of it. So Metal Gear Solid 4, if you break it down in terms of gameplay, I think 5 is the best Metal Gear game because it's like the things that you can do in it, and it's so open, and just the feel of it and how much fun it is to just all these different pathways to achieve the same goal. It's incredible. So gameplay, Metal Gear Solid 5 all day long, every day. But the story in Metal Gear Solid 5 is at the bottom of the list because it's not finished. And the whole Kiefer Sutherland debacle. And you can tell that Kojima and Konami were parting ways, and like this is the end result. And it's kind of a miracle that the game is as good as it is, because for a Metal Gear game, like that's kind of the main thing. Is like you want this really weird, layered, like anime leaning, and I don't mean anime in the bad way, I mean anime in the good way. If you know, you know. But like that's where it was lacking the most. I think the most perfect game in the series is probably 3 because it's everything. Like it has incredibly memorable boss fights, really interesting gameplay design, a really, like, to be honest, like linear, well told A to B to C plot line that you can easily follow with very little weird Kojima-isms that you do. And admittedly, and I love this guy, but admittedly, there's some stuff in his storytelling where you just have to be like, okay, I accept this and I'm going to move forward. So that, then one, I think is like it's a lot like 3, and then it's just like this perfect thing. The only thing that holds 1 back is for people who don't like old games, like it's hard. Old PlayStation games have not aged well for a lot of people, and I totally understand that. But 2 is this weird one. It's like this what's the phrase? The redheaded stepchild of the group, where it's just like, it definitely has its fans. There are people that have always stood by it and thought it was a really cool experience. And I am kind of leaning more into that way now as I'm playing through it again,
because of how forward thinking it is.
Yeah, and it's just like it's like you're going back and like looking at like the work of Nostradamus or something, when he would, every once in a while he would, the broken clock thing, like every once in a while it's 4 o'clock, right? And this game was fucking 4 o'clock all day long when you look at what society's like, and not just our society, but globally. Like this is a thing, like genocides have started because of the internet. That's real. That's a crazy thing to say, but that's happened. So, but yeah, it's still things that I didn't like about it back in the day, I still find myself not liking. Like, it's a very confined game. You're really only in 2 environments. There's the tanker, which again lasts like 2 hours tops, and then there's the big shell, which is, every area looks the same. It's like this middle of the ocean big oil rig type thing, and it's very like banal. There's really nothing special about it. It has some really cool Metal Gear ass boss fights, but then it has some other weaker ones. Famously, like, there's a character named Fat Man who is he's like a evil midnight bomber, and he fucking zips around on rollerblades. And so the rollerblades thing is great. Don't get me wrong. The rollerblades thing is great. But everything else about that boss fight is very like, really? Like, you're doing this? Like, you gave us Psycho Mantis and you're doing this? What the fuck? But anyway, so yeah, I'm finding myself enjoying it more now than I ever have before, and I'm probably not even going to bother playing the other 2 games on here. I'm just going to finish Metal Gear Solid 2. And it's not that long of a game. Like, you can all in. You could probably beat it in like 20 hours, and that's if you're going out and really There's this really cool thing that you can do in the game where you you have to sneak up on a dude and then point your gun either at his head or at his dick, and they will do like a shimmy, and then a dog tag will come out. And you can collect a dog tag for every character and boss in the game. And that's really fun and very, very Pokemon-y, which is another thing about Peace Walker that rules. But yeah, it's great. I know this won't ever happen, but I would love for you to sit down and play this whole series.
Oh my God. We're starting with Metal Gear Solid, or do I have to play Metal Gear on the 8-bit NES?
No, you're playing that on the MSX, buddy. That's the proper version. No, I would say play Solid 2, Solid 3. And if you really, really like them, then 4. 4 is like a total fan service thing, and if you never play the other ones, like, you just won't enjoy 4 as much. But you never know. You might. I know retro games isn't really your deal, so if you started at 1, if you were able to get through it and like get the best stuff out of it, the story and all that other stuff, maybe.
Well, what about 5? You didn't even mention 5.
Look, 5 is a really, really good game, but there's so much of the Metal Gear-ness about it that's lacking. So, like, to me, if you played nothing of the series and jumped straight into 5, I think you would probably enjoy it, like, in terms of like what you can do in it. But I think you're leaving so much of this shit on the table. Yeah. That so much of this stuff that makes this series as beloved as it is, and really showcases like what Kojima as an artist and as an auteur is capable of. So it's kind of like, why bother? Play 5 if you're going to play all these games. I would certainly grant that. But anywho, I think you can get this game still online for less than $20. And if you've never played any Metal Gear games, I think if you like video games, you should play Metal Gear Solid games. Yeah. If you like really cool creative stories in your video games, then double check these shits out. But that's just me. I'm a Kojima creep, but there are many of us. The second one I'll talk about here, which is again So here's the deal. Here's the deal, gang. Nobody buys Xbox games, so you can get these things for like dirt ass cheap.
When I saw the first box, I was like, "Is this an Xbox 360 game that he's like dug out of the archives?"
They look pretty similar, yeah. But yeah, because of Game Pass, like physical game sales on Xbox, like there's fewer and fewer of them that come out because no one's buying them, and the ones that are out, like if you wait like a day, you'll get like this game, which I think launched at $40, was down to 20 in like the next week or something crazy like that. But this is Sonic Origins Plus, and it is a collection of the Sonic games that matter. So this is Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles, and Sonic CD. And then, because what makes it Plus is that you get like, I think it's like, yeah, it says right there, 16 Game Gear games. Which, all I'm going to say about those Game Gear games is like, yeah, they're neat. They're on here. And that's it. That's the extent of how I need to sell them. That's it. The Game Gear games were always like not very fun. Like they just by nature of the Game Gear, like you didn't get the sense of speed the same way that you do with the Sonic games. And it's like done by a different team. They're not terrible. They're better than a lot of like shitty Game Boy games, but like let's be honest, like you don't need to play them all. But what? Real quick, this comes with a little slippy case, and you got a little art book.
Yeah.
And then of course you got the disc, which I will say this is a neat touch. It's got the Genesis grid deal on there, and check this out, my man. This is really really cool. The insert, it's a reversible cover, and it's just a straight up Genesis cover, which is really really cool.
That's great. I'm actually surprised that you don't have that as the outside showing cover.
Yeah, so I used to do that. Anytime I had a reversible, I was always a sucker for reversible covers.
Oh, me too.
And I would always do them. But I did it one time to a game where I fucked up the creases because like I didn't do it perfectly. And because of that, I'm like, you know what, no.
I'm mad at yourself.
Yeah. I'm like, never
Not
again.
that mistake again.
Never, exactly. Fool me once. So, okay, let's talk about these games a little bit as you peruse that wonderful art book there. So what's really cool about this collection, which I am, speaking of that insert, I am ruining it as we speak because I can't put it in right. We're just going to set that down right there and admire and deal with that later.
You'll deal with it later. With, I just imagine you with tweezers and a candle.
Yeah, exactly.
Not messing up those creases.
Nope. Not on my watch. So what's really, really cool about these games that it's not just the Genesis ROMs like dumped into a disc and a day is called.
Yeah.
Those are there if you want to play the original Genesis games, like the original experience. But the guy who did team, Christian Whitehead, and so I don't know. This is a point of confusion for me. On Sonic Mania, which I highly recommend, came out several years ago now, but it was like this new 2D Sonic game that's fantastic, and it's done by I believe is a guy named Christian Whitehead. At least that's like the splash screen branding.
Okay.
I don't know if Christian Whitehead is like the name of like a team or if it's literally just a dude. I don't know.
Or a pseudonym.
I will assume it could be a pseudonym. I will assume that is the name of a dude. But this dude, like from the ground up, made new versions of these games. So like they're in 16:9, they're in full 1080. I think they're 1080p. They might be 4K. Can't tell. Anyway, like they're ground up remasters of these Genesis games, and they're great. Like they're fucking awesome. A lot of times when you see an older game and it'll say like, oh yeah, it's upscaled to 1080p.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of not. Or I mean, it literally is upscaled, but it'll use like super sampling or checkerboarding, and then like it just looks stretchy and blown out and gross. This is like a pixel per pixel redone thing, and the amount of time and effort that they put into this is awesome, and it really shows. So that part of it is really, really good. You have all these unlockables, like different elements of soundtracks, and I think, by and large, I go back and I look at the entire catalog of these Sonic games, and I don't think Sonic has aged nearly as well as Mario has in terms of like just being video games.
Yeah.
There's some that are better than others, which I'll get into in a second. But one thing you cannot take away from Sonic at all is the soundtracks. Like, think the music in Sonic games.
Yeah.
It's some of the best video game music ever written, ever. And what's a side note to that, all the soundtrack to Sonic 3 is completely redone because that was actually done by Michael Jackson, and it was like done under like a secret name type deal. Do you know this story? Okay. So this is the people out there know this, but I'm telling you this story.
Okay.
So Michael Jackson was a huge Sega fan.
Right.
There was a game called Moonwalker, for example.
Yeah. Right.
Also,
we're talking about the same Michael Jackson, right?
yeah, the deceased pedophile Michael Jackson. We're also the king of pop. Anyway, he loved Sega and loved video games. Famously, I'll just take a shot of that.
I'm not trying to stuff on your story, but
No, it's okay. I want this. This is for me. You are the Robin Quivers to my Howard Stern, and I eternally love you for it. So the Michael Jackson, he had famously had this gnarly arcade on the Neverland Ranch. Loved him some video games, and he loved him some Sega. He approached Sega because he loved Sonic, and he was like, "Hey, some of the music in these Sonic games is fantastic, and like I don't know if you know this about me, but like I'm pretty good at writing songs."
right. And I love kids.
Yeah, boy does he, boy does he. Allegedly. Oh, look at the shirt. Yeah, allegedly. Look at that.
I came ready for this conversation.
You did. So Michael Jackson basically says, "Hey, I'm going to make you music for a Sonic the Hedgehog game," and Sega's like, "Yeah, we would like that."
That's okay.
Yeah, that sounds good to us. And the whole plan was like Michael Jackson was going to make this music, and they were going to use it as a promotional tool. Like Michael Jackson presents Sonic 3, like huge business, right? So he writes songs for Sonic 3, and then he hears them. And this is the part of the story that I've always thought was really funny, and it kind of shows how out of touch with reality Michael Jackson is and was. Yeah, because he's very dead. He allegedly, the story goes, is he heard the music that he composed. Now remember, he's composing music in his multi-million-dollar facility.
Yeah,
right? So it's just like this is oh hey Quincy Jones, like
right.
pop into the studio here and we're gonna write some tunes.
Total audiophile quality.
Yeah, exactly. So like he wrote the songs in that environment and then gave the data to Sega, and then they
to compress it down
into their FM synth chip, which is like the Genesis. And I personally love Sega Genesis sound, like that FM synth sound is really to me, I love it. A lot of people shit all over it, and they think that's like one of the defining features in the Super Nintendo camp is like the music on Super Nintendo so much better because of that Sony chip and blah 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 blah. To me, it's all subjective. I like them all, Daddy. I think 60-minute music is great, and there is definitely a distinct sound to Sega Genesis. Not only to Sega Genesis, but the different versions of the console. Like you can hear, like, oh, this is an original Genesis because they swapped out the chip, and like the newer redesigned Genesis, like they really chinsed out. Now it's PCM audio, not FM synth, and you can hear it. It's very tinny and bad. And that's the model of Genesis that was out for Sonic 3. So like they took bad FM synth, which is good, and then it's being presented to Michael Jackson on this PCM shit. And either way, I think Michael Jackson would have been like, "What? No, this is not.
Yeah.
This is not. You can't put my name attached to this." And that's kind of what happened. So then there was the agreement, so to speak, was like, "Well, this is the music. It's yours, but like you don't credit me, and I'll leave you alone. You can have the music." And so the Sonic 3 that was released originally on the cartridge, that's Michael Jackson's music. And over the years, every time it's been re-released, it's always been this crazy like licensing issue where Sega would have to go to the people who owned Michael Jackson's music catalog and be like, "Hey," and that's why for years you would never see Sonic 3 on compilations. They would just skip it because it was too much of a business hassle. They would just be, "No, fuck this, we're not going to do it." It's on the Sonic Gems collection or Mega collection for the GameCube and PS2 and all that stuff. And that was, I think, the last time that they were able to get away with it without having to do up a whole new deal. And then after that, when they did the Genesis, I kind of forget what they called it, but it was like for PS3 and 360, it's this big compilation of like 60 Genesis games. That's the first time where you're starting to see Sonic 3 not be released. And going forward from that point on, like Sonic 3 wasn't on, I don't think it was on the Virtual Console ever. That's the Wii and the 3D or the 3DS storefront. And I don't think it's on the Switch right now, like the Switch Genesis thing. But it's the game. Sega basically just said, "Fuck this. We're just gonna make new music, and then we can release our game and be done with it." And so a lot of people complain about this version of Sonic 3 not having the original music. Yeah. I complain about Sonic 3 because it's not a good video game. It's where, to me, Sonic 3 and Knuckles is where Sonic first started to show his ass. Yeah. And that is, if you play that game, and I played through Sonic 3 with Knuckles recently for another podcast that I used to do, and I hadn't played it in years. And I remember, like, so when you think of a Sonic game, you think of, like, continuous running and just that feeling of speed and how good it feels. Yeah. And, like, just trying to do that over and over and, like, doing the loops. In Sonic 3 and Knuckles, you would run, and then stop, dead stop. Yeah. Or you would run, and now you're dead. You just fall off, and because you're running so fast, you didn't know this was here. Or run into spikes, or run into all this shit. And, like, again and again and again in that game, that would happen. And it got to the point where, like, I was like, my memory of this game is not what it used to be. And then, try this on, and this is one of those things where at the time you think of the Sonic 3 and the Knuckles cartridges, right? You think, that's neat, like the whole lock-on technology thing. Well, pull that lens back, be an adult about this. Sega charged you $60 2 times for what was supposed to be the same game. Like, Sonic 3 was Sonic 3 with Knuckles. The Sega, the marketing department, which, like, this is kind of the beginning of the decisions that would... Well, this is... Okay, to be fair, this was kind of a good decision monetarily. Because it worked. Yeah. They sold Sonic 3 and they sold Sonic and Knuckles separately, and they made a lot of money. So it was a shitty idea in terms of, like, you know, morally or, like, fan-friendly, but a good idea in terms of making money. But this was, like, at that point in Sega's history where they were, you know, they were right on the cusp of releasing the 32X, and then really Sega of America just... And them falling out of tune with Japan and vice versa, and Sega just starts coming apart. Starts to come apart. There's several more years of them failing to get them to where, you know, they're out of the hardware business. But Sonic and Knuckles and 3, like, it's a bit of a cash grab. Sonic 3 was, like, really short. It was like 5 worlds or something like that, and then like 2 acts per world, or maybe 6. So it was like, I remember as a kid playing it and being like, holy shit, this is like a really short...
We're done already?
Yeah, exactly. And Sonic 2 is long as fuck. Sonic 2 has like 12 worlds. And Sonic, still to this day, Sonic 2 and Sonic CD, I think, and Sonic 1, they're all great. Like, they're all really, really good games. Like, the soundtracks to those are non-Michael Jackson, but they're better. Yeah. Like, they're great.
Did you say they're better?
Yeah, I think that they're better than the... People love that Sonic 3 soundtrack, and, like, I get it. Like, it's fine. But to me, for my money, I never thought it was as good as, especially Sonic 1. Sonic 1 soundtrack is flawless victory. Like, it's just super, super good music. But anyway, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, not exactly what it used to be.
So wait, you might have glanced over this, but this Michael Jackson thing is blowing my mind. So this is not, you're not reporting rumor. Like, it's like Michael Jackson did the soundtrack for Sonic 3. Like,
you can. Since you've never heard this story before, I would encourage you to go online and read the whole deal to get the nitty gritty behind it. It's been confirmed by Tom Kalinske, who is the president of Sega. Like, this is all out in the open now. This is like a known thing.
And I am assuming, what year did that game come out?
Sonic 3 was end of 93, I believe. Okay. Maybe 94.
So 93 was when the first accusation against Michael Jackson happened, and then that's
a part of it too. Yep, that is a part of it. It was like, well, hey, we make video games. We're kind of a kid-facing company. Ugh. So it wasn't like Sega wasn't distraught when Michael Jackson was upset about the quality of his work. It kind of worked, and it was a two-way street type of a thing.
Okay, so right, but so for Michael Jackson's part, he just didn't think it sounded good once it was compressed down to, like, filtered through.
Yeah, and Sega's part was processor. Like, you almost certainly are a child molester, and this is Sonic, so we should probably
allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly. There you go. Thank you. So yeah, but it was one of those things that just kind of happened, like whatever you call that, you know, like even split. Like, we're good. We'll just say, hey, we tried. Hey, we tried, and we'll just move, ships in the night. We'll move on.
Even split.
Yeah. But back to this collection. Again, if you get on an Xbox, I think it's like $2 or something like that. It's dirt cheap. If you're a fan of those old Sonic games, it's very well done. One of the coolest special features in this collection is they have these like 100-piece orchestras playing Sonic music medleys, like videos of it.
Yeah.
So you can watch like this beautiful string section playing Green Hill Zone and shit like that, which for me was like, oh, this rules. And the last thing I'll say about this is Sonic CD. That's a hell of a game. It's so neat, and it's always been neat, and the whole concept of like because I don't know if I'm assuming you never played Sonic CD because
was it on Sega CD or Saturn?
It was Sega CD.
Okay.
Yeah, there was very famously no Sega or Sonic game on the Saturn.
Maybe they needed one.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows? But Sonic CD is such a cool gameplay hook where you travel through time within a level, and the stuff that you do in the past affects what's in the future. So if you want to like really beat the game to its fullest, you have to like solve all these problems in the past and then make sure that they're still good in the present, and then go to the future and fight the boss. And it's like a really cool gameplay loop, and figuring out where you need to go to travel to get to the past and all that stuff is like, it's the most exploratory Sonic game. Like Sonic games were kind of famous for having multiple paths to get to the end, but Sonic CD, you could really, really actually legitimately explore it. It's more Mario-esque than a Sonic game.
Yeah, see, so the thing, because I grew up with Mario, and then I dabbled in Sonic, and it was a big deal at the time. And so when I would go to my friends who had Genesai, I would play the Sonic games, and it felt really fun. Like you mentioned Green Hill Zone, when you start the game and you're going through the loop, it's like, wow, this is really fast. I'm getting all these rings. This is cool. You kind of see the scenery kind of flowing by. And it never felt very good when that you immediately stop by just hitting a wall or falling into a hole or hitting an enemy. And so from a gameplay standpoint, I should say a game design standpoint, it's interesting. With Mario, there's a billion different ways that you can go when the game slows down and you're platforming, and it's like you can go here, we'll introduce like these different outfits, and then they give them different powers. But with Sonic, where the gimmick of the game is speed, there's I don't want to say that there's not as much that you can do with that. But what I would say though is that if you're tempted to introduce elements into the game that make it more like a Mario game, where it's like, oh, let's have Sonic explore these different areas, let's make it look more like a traditional platformer, that might not work when everybody's expectation is we need to see him running fast, and then you're kind of getting stuff along the way while the scenery scales behind you. So with that as a basis, maybe you can describe to me, because you said earlier how Sonic, I think Sonic 3, you said kind of failed at that because they took that sense of speed away from you whenever you would go faster.
Well, the speed is there. It's just that they threw in too many obstacles and random shitty, like unpredictable deaths that slowed the momentum down. And really the word I would use to describe the best of Sonic is momentum. Okay. Like for me, and let's be clear about this. Like if we're doing an apples to oranges comparison, let's say the best of Mario, so Mario 3 and Mario World versus the entirety of Sonic, Mario 3 and Mario World all day, every day.
And that's not really fair because those are some of the best games ever.
Yeah, but there's plenty of people that will die on the Sonic Hill, and they love Sonic.
And they were pitted against each other
100%.
at the time.
Yes.
So the comparison is kind of unfair, but also kind of fair.
Yeah.
Well, then how does Sonic CD then handle that?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think Sonic CD takes the thing that the other Sonic games lacked, and maybe exploration was in all of the Sonic games. So that, to be fair, but not to the level of like a Mario World. Certainly not. Like Mario World had like hidden shit on the map.
Hidden worlds.
Yeah, it was awesome.
The Star World.
Yeah, special. But in Sonic CD, it does more of that than any of the other Sonic games. Like you can, like the levels are huge, like horizontally and vertically. So there's so much more to explore, and the fact that you have this tiered time travel thing where if you want the best ending in the game, and the game has multiple endings, feather in its cap, like there's only one Mario World ending. In order to do that, you would have to go and do this exploration. You have to go travel to the past, and when you travel, the world changes. Like the colors change, like things that are like that in where you started the game that might have looked destroyed or are not destroyed. Things that you do destroy in the past, like when you go to the future, are still destroyed. Like so, you affect like the world, and then for a 16-bit game, it's kind of wild. So I think that what Sonic CD does essentially is it takes the best parts of Sonic, the momentum, and there's none of that. There's in every Sonic game there's cheap deaths. There's just a lot more of them in Sonic 3 and Knuckles. But in Sonic CD, like, you have the momentum that you love from Sonic games, and then injected with this Mario-esque, or Mario World to be specific, exploration, and it kind of makes it the best of the bunch. And then top on the cherry on top of that sundae is that this is a CD game, so it's got a really, really good soundtrack, and it's got two of them in this version, because there's the American soundtrack, which has its fans, and then there's the Japanese soundtrack, and they're two completely different compositions. Like, the music, they're not the same music at all. So, and that was like a real famous thing back in the day. People would shit on the American version because the Japanese version was perceived to be better. To me, it's subjective. I actually prefer the American one. There's like songs with like singing, songs with like lyrical singing in them, which, like, you know, they're great. Like, they're fucking great. They get you pumped and you want to fucking run really fast. But anyway, yeah, I think Sonic CD out of all these games is the one that I think holds up the best. I think it's a hell of a game. It's a hell of a Sega property. And Sonic Mania, to bring this all back to where we started here, borrows a lot from Sonic CD in terms of the level structure and like how big the levels are, how exploratory they are. The one game that's never mentioned ever on any of these compilations, and it's only by virtue of its attachment to the Doomsday failed 32X, but Knuckles Chaotix is the Sonic game that basically never happened.
Isn't that bad?
I don't think it's a bad game at all. I actually think it's really cool. Like, there's this whole mechanic where you're like attached but via like a magical bungee cord where you're controlling two characters, and you have to use the momentum of this bungee cord to propel one character to like fling the other, and then you can kind of like stop on a dime and like do this weird, like, what would you call that? Like a, you know, first then the now. I don't know. YouTube. You're watching this on YouTube. Watch someone play Chaotix. It's going to do a better job than me explaining it. But I only bring it up because only weirdo old people who grew up with Sega know about that game.
I didn't know about it.
Yeah, exactly. So they're like, it's never released on compilations. None of the 32X stuff is, and that most of that's fair because it's kind of bad. But I will on a future episode of Side Crisis, I absolutely plan on going 32X wild and showing the actual really genuinely good games that are on the 32X. And there is 5 of them. Maybe 6. But we'll have to get into that. Friend, we've gone long here. I know that you have games that you want to talk about, and we will. So we're going to come on back with another What You've Been Playing episode. So thank you so much for watching mine. We'll get in Uncle Bob's on the next round. So like, subscribe, leave comments, offer suggestions. We're on Spotify. Leave a 5-star review there. That does help. And yeah, that'll be me. Anything you want to pipe in there before we wrap her up?
Nope.
All right, let's do a gentleman's handshake. This is going to be we're going to do a spin dash. So here we go.